Welcome to the Operation Move podcast. My name is Zoe, and this week we're just going to be talking about a bit of everything. It's a bit about failing, a bit about beginning, a bit about not being afraid to change. It's a bit of a weird, it's been really weird. At least month up here because I'm in the Northern Rivers, and so we had a major flooding event, far more major than any that we've had before, about a month ago, and I'm largely unaffected because we live sort of like on top of a hill, but I'm always aware of like saying like, oh, I'm unaffected because I'm not directly affected, but you're kind of absorbing everything that's around you. So of course you are affected by things that are happening around you and things that are happening to your friends and things that are happening within the community. And so for us, like in terms of a direct impact, the worst thing that happened was that we were cut off from other major centres. So weren't able to get supplies, but as somebody that tends to be a bit of a pantry hoarder, I wasn't too worried about that, but it was a bit scary at times because you just don't know how long the water's going to take to go down. And with our closest sort of main centre being Ballina, particularly with the way the king tides are, like it would feel like it was going down, but then the tide would come in and it's not going down, and you don't want to risk going and like getting stuck somewhere. So that sort of has been going on for a while. And then we, I guess, sort of hoping that things would have an opportunity to dry out. And as all of the recovery works are going on and everything like that, and then this week we've just had more torrential rain, and it looks like more flooding. So it's just been a really weird period of time, and sort of like going back to uni, but everything is online still because the university has been used as an evacuation centre, which in some ways has been a blessing because you're not having to drive anywhere and you can be like a little bit more flexible with your time. But in some ways too, I found it like really hard to get my head in the game. And I'm also trying to sort of was thinking that this year would be like a good year to sort of like get back into doing some events, which I really love doing. But I think after not doing any for really like a couple of years, it's like a huge amount of mostly social anxiety that goes along with it. Not so much racing anxiety, although there's a little bit of that, like I'm going up to the Australian National Masters, and I'm aware that I'm in like a pretty competitive age group, because there's a lot of people who could probably still be like having a crack in the open category, and I'm aware that I will probably be one of the slower competitors in that age group. So there's probably, you always have that little bit of imposter syndrome with that. It's like, should I really be there, blah blah blah. But it's one of those things that I wanted to do, and I thought this is a cool thing to work on like over multiple years, not just 1 year. And a lot of times with the track stuff too, like there's it's just good practice because I don't really get an opportunity to I never get the opportunity to run on a track down here because there isn't one. So there's that sort of tension of like wanting to do it, but like all of this sort of like social anxiety and some event anxiety about it, and sort of like, but wanting to push through that as well. And that's happening where are we? I'm recording this on Tuesday, and that is on Friday morning. So it's coming up pretty quick. And I forgot to tell my coach, or that's one interpretation of it, or I signed up for it but then attempted to block it out, which is why I didn't tell my coach. So I've been slightly adapting what I would normally have on my program this week, just in terms of like keeping the intensity but doing slightly less. And some of that is kind of like rain mandated because I've got the treadmill, but which is great for emergencies. But with the rain being the way it is, it has certainly meant that it's easier to sort of cut things down and just like doing less volume. So like I might do a workout on the treadmill, but I probably wouldn't like do as much of a cool down on the treadmill, because by the time I finished, I'm just like ready to hop off the treadmill. And I do find in a lot of ways it can be more challenging like to do a workout on the treadmill than just, you know, outside. Just in terms of, I think that I want to stop a lot more than what I do when I'm outside and there's other sort of stimulus happening and all of that sort of stuff. So it's kind of worked out well in that you get like a little bit more recovery, a little bit more tapering and that kind of stuff, just so that like I'm, you know, like in good shape to have a good day. On Friday, I have the 5,000 meters on the track, which is at 10, I think. And I'm just getting in under the wire to have the benefit of the time difference between here and Queensland. So I don't have to get super early to get up there in time for that. And then on Saturday, there is an 8-kilometre cross country, which the course may, depending on, it might be pretty sloshy, but I figure any adverse weather conditions probably is just like a bit of a like an equalizer. So I'll embrace that. Anyway, today I really wanted to talk about, I think over the last couple of years particularly, there's been a lot of just people trying to continue with what they've done before, but it's been tough. Like it's been a struggle, and maybe for some people it's also impacted by getting COVID and trying to recover from COVID. But sometimes it's just the impact of like a couple of really crappy years where like the motivation is low and a lot of things, a lot of obstacles are in your way, and I've had a few conversations this week with people just feeling like their fitness has just fallen off a cliff, and it can feel like failing, and it can be hard to begin again. And that's sort of like the choices that you're faced with, is that having to start somewhere that is very different from where in your mind like maybe you should be, and it can feel like tough to kind of go, okay, well, like I feel like my fitness should be here, but now it's here, and what am I exactly going to do about it? And, you know, I think that it can be tempting, or it can be easy, at least for myself, to kind of go, oh, well, like some of it's probably because like I'm getting older, when in reality it's not at all. And so some of it is being honest with yourself, but not just in the way of like, oh, I should do better. Like being honest with yourself both ways, which I look at as, well, if this is something I want, if I want to sort of like get back to where I was before or improve, then this is what it's going to look like. But also taking a broader picture of it and go, maybe I don't want to invest the time in the amount of work that takes. Maybe there's a bigger lifestyle conversation to be had here, and like maybe I got to figure out what brings me the most joy, and maybe that's not getting back into, you know, like some kind of like peak fitness or peak running shape. Maybe it is, maybe it's not, but being open to both sides of that story. I think, you know, that's a bit like they've talked about the sort of like great resignation over this period of time too, and I think it's a bit the same, is that sort of, you know, like people have this opportunity to kind of, you know, like if you're privileged enough to be in a position where you are not undergoing huge, you know, financial stress or health stress, then the last couple of years has been a bit of a time where you could kind of like take a step back and, you know, kind of like look at things and going like, is this really worth it? Is this what I want? You know, all of that sort of stuff. You know, like I was lucky that pretty much all of my work is remote anyway, so I wasn't really affected financially, but also not a kind of thing where I guess the downside is like, I guess I was probably at my most busy through the whole period, which was good and bad. But I think, yeah, you know, like having a break from sort of like training for races and that kind of thing can give you like a really good opportunity to kind of look at like why you're doing it, what you enjoy about it. Is it something, you know, you can kind of tend to just continue with things because that's the way you've always done it, and kind of think of it like this is a key part of my identity and this is why I do it, and, you know, and not really kind of like actually look at it and see like what it costs you, what it gives you, you know, like all of that sort of stuff. And also just really not being afraid to try something completely new, you know, like just because up until this point all of your sort of exercise or fitness or training goals might have been centered around running, that doesn't mean that that is like, that's not set in stone. You know, like you could try something new, you could try something different. I think it can get like bogged down in this kind of sense of identity or whatever, but you know, like with anything, you know, like things can change all the time. It's just about if you want to do it or not. You know, like I was having a conversation with someone at the gym this week, and they were sort of asking me about uni and fitting it in and that kind of stuff and managing it. And it's just like, yeah, you know, like, yep, I probably, you know, like with hours of work, it's probably close to, like what I do is probably close to about 30 hours a week. And, you know, like you always think it's going to get easier with kids as they get older. And in some ways it really does. Like, you know, it's easy to forget that there was a time when I couldn't just like leave the house and leave them in the house, but which I can do now. But their needs get a lot more complex as they get older. And I think that it's often like harder to manage too, because like when they're babies, you can talk pretty openly with almost anyone about stuff, because like baby issues are kind of universal, and I don't really see it as like a violation of privacy or whatever. But as they get older, it's kind of like their story, and I can't really necessarily talk about their story to just anyone because it's their story. And so you kind of like, I think in some ways it can be with tweens or teenagers, it can be a bit more isolating that way, because it's something that they're going through, but you're going through it with them, but you don't necessarily feel like you can sort of talk about it openly as you might have done when they were a baby. So, you know, it's tough. And it probably is a lot more emotionally demanding than when they were little, and like the vast majority of their needs were physical, which was sort of like high needs on their part, but pretty easy on mine. So you got all that sort of stuff going on as well. And, you know, appointments always popping up all over the place, and, you know, and so, you know, but you can make anything work, like if you want to, and if it's important, and if you enjoy it, you know, like I was sort of, we'll be honest, this session, I am in serious struggle town with anatomy. That's just, it's one of those things that there's a whole heap of information to learn, and it is like, they say this often in the course, and I think it's very true. It's like learning another language. And so it's not like some of the other subjects that I've done where there's a lot of content, but it's sort of like once you understand the foundation, you can kind of like logic your way through most of it, even if you've forgotten some of it. So I found physiology like quite intuitive that way, that once I kind of had the foundation, I was like, oh, so this makes sense and this makes sense. Whereas with anatomy, it's been a while since I've had to do like that volume of new learning, where some of it definitely leads into other things. Like once you understand this, you can understand that. But yeah, it's just really, really tough. And so it is one of those things where I was working on my, I got an anatomy colouring book just to help like tap into a different part of the brain, because I just figure like the more ways I can get the information in, the better. And Josh was asking me, it's like, oh, like, do you enjoy this? And I was like, yeah, actually I do. Like sometimes it's challenging, sometimes it's tough, sometimes I resent like the time that I could be crocheting instead of studying. But I really enjoy it as well. So, and if you do, then it'll work out, these things always do. So I guess what I'm saying is like, don't be afraid of a big change or having to change your current situation to accommodate something else. Like I know like probably when I started this year, I was thinking like one of my bigger goals was to probably like get back into sort of like half marathon PB shape, which for me, my fastest half was about, I think it was like 1:36, something like that. And I know the amount of work that took, and like how dialed in sort of things had to be, and doesn't really worry me. But it is one of those things that has possibly, I haven't really decided yet, but I feel like it could be like shifting a bit where, like I've been sort of, like going to the gym a fair bit and doing strength training at home, working on some other skills type stuff. And I was like, I don't know, like this isn't optimal for being as fast as I possibly can for running. Like if I wanted to be as fast as I possibly can for distance running, then what I would be doing would be running 6 days a week, which is what I mostly do anyway. It would be, like probably a maximum of 2 to 3 sort of strength sessions a week, maybe with like a couple of sort of like 30-minute sort of like rehabby injury prevention type stuff. And a lot of recovery, a lot of eating, that is what it looks like. What it doesn't look like, which is what I have been doing, which is probably average. Like normally if I'm not sort of sick or dealing with biblical floods, I would run 6 days a week. It would usually be about in the vicinity of 70 to 90 kilometers. Probably when I was in peak running shape, it was probably more like 100 kilometers, but that's not like a huge difference. And I have PT once a week, which is something I also did when I was in peak running shape. But when I was doing that stuff before, I would only go to classes at the gym once to twice a week, and I would cherry pick the strength focused non-cardio ones, so I didn't have that sort of like interference with running. Whereas now, like on a good week, I would probably go like 4 times a week, and I would probably do strength training at home also like around 4 times. And so like the level of volume definitely interrupts my level of running recovery. Like in some ways I'm used to it, so I don't necessarily feel it. Like I don't feel fatigued, I don't feel tired, I feel good on runs. But then when I've had periods where for whatever reason I haven't been going to the gym, or I've taken a break, like out there running going, oh, I feel amazing. So that's at the point where it is it didn't necessarily start as a choice, like I'm choosing this over that. It was more like we're spending so much time at home. I really got a lot out of the social interaction at the gym. So I was like, this isn't necessarily ideal for running, but this is what I'm going to do. And it just sort of went on from there. Whereas now it's sort of like getting into the territory where it is more of a choice. And so it's kind of like, I just kind of want to be, like a strong, resilient human and do things that are fun and not worry about it being optimal for one sort of specific discipline, and trust that everything will improve over time, albeit like probably a lot more slowly than if I really like focused on something. So I guess what I'm saying is that particularly if you are looking at not necessarily like starting from scratch. No one ever really starts from scratch, because you've got the benefit of all of your experiences, and you've got the benefit of, of knowing what you've done in the past and knowing what you're capable of. So it's not like really like beginning. But if you are kind of like feel like you are kind of like going back a few squares and you're kind of like resetting, it's also just a great opportunity to look at what else you might benefit from being a beginner at, or like instead of looking at like what event you want to do or what you want to achieve, kind of looking at like, if I had like, what do I want my day to look like? What do I want the lifestyle to look like? How do I want to feel? It is a great time to look at those things and not get locked in just because, like in my case, because I'm a running coach, and like I believe that running will always be a core part of my life, but not being afraid of periods of time where either it's less important or it's not important, or I take a break from it. Like all of those, being able to be open to all of those things allows you to just be able to enjoy more things, and not that the number one thing that you want to stay away from in all of this is getting to the point where anything feels like a chore and like I have to do this, because no one has to do anything. I mean, beyond like the usual kind of stuff where apparently I do actually have to cook dinner every night for the kids. Although the other week we have like one takeaway night a week where they usually get fish and chips, but it was the day before that, and I asked them if they wanted a pizza, and they're like, why do you not want to cook? And I'm like, yeah, I do not want to cook. So apparently there are some non-negotiables in there, but for the most part, when you're talking about fitness and training and running, there is nothing that you actually have to do. And I think that there can be a little bit of fear about like changing that, about what that would look like. And, particularly when, like a lot of your community might be in the running community, but the reality is that they'll support you no matter what, because it's a lot more than running. So I think it is a great time to really look at the things that you enjoy, why you enjoy them, and just opening your mind a little bit to be flexible to maybe find something that you hadn't thought of before. Anyway, that is it from me this week. Hopefully I will be back soon and I can tell you all about the Masters Nationals. Hopefully it is a lot more fun and a lot less scary than anticipated, but that's okay. It's just like, I think with some of these things, it's just like, you just got to rip that Band-Aid off and just remember. I think with those sorts of things, one of the things that helps me is like, you can get into your head with all of this stuff about like what it's going to be like, but then if you bring it back to reality, like every other track event that I've ever been to, like how welcoming everyone is, how supportive everyone is, even like say, well, like what's the worst case scenario? I get lost, possible, or I come last, very possible. But it doesn't matter. Like, I don't care. I've come last before, I've gotten lost before, you know. Chances are something pretty cool can happen when you put yourself in those situations, and then it's going to give you a lot more confidence, like going to the next one and into other situations as well. I think that that's one of the cool things about these sorts of things is, you know, you build strength in one area, and it sort of transfers into others. So yeah, that's what I'll be doing. We've got a few days after that, we've got sort of like a little family holiday booked in for Melbourne, which has worked out to be good timing. So I'll get some nice relaxation and recovery after those two events. But I'm also, I think, like, part of examining like what I want out of my running and racing is also being cool with like going out and doing a race and have it be like a good effort, but not feeling like it has to be an absolute like red line situation, and just going, you know, like go out and have a good day. And that's always my goal. And, you know, and sometimes you feel like it's a day where you really want to push, and that's great. But some days it might be like, I am happy to run this at like a good effort where I feel like I'm working, and enough that I can also enjoy it while I'm out there, and it's not so hard. Yeah, I mean, I think if you change that relationship to, just like anything, you know, like you can change your relationship to what races are, you know, and they don't have to be an absolute all-out effort every time if that's not something that you enjoy, or just like waiting for the opportunities where you know you're having a good day. And yeah, so that is it for this week, and I will be back soon.